20% of the midterm, the final is going to be the brains, and 20% is going to be the muscles. So I want everybody to get 100% on the muscles. So if they ask you the face, the only muscles they can ask are
oris,
orbicularis, oculi,
oris,
orbicularis oris, temporalis, masseter, sternocleidomastoideus. If they ask the chest, they can ask pec major.
Underneath is minor.
So just press record. Pec major. Underneath that is pec minor. Between the ribs or the intercostals. In front, we have serratus anterior. Then in the back, you can see lats. If he asks the abdomens, we have rectus abdominis, external oblique, internal oblique, and the deepest is transverse abdominis. There's typically 4 on the abdomen, 4 on the chest, 2 on the face. If we ask you the arms, we have biceps brachii, brachialis, and triceps brachii. The 4 most missed on the forearm. This is the forearm. And the back we have our extensors. So we have extensor digitorum and extensor carpi radialis longus. And the anterior we have our flexors. Flexor carpi radialis. And underneath palmaris longus, deep on the right and left, we have extensor digitorum superficialis. Those are the 4 most missed. From there we have our hamstrings. We have lateral, we have biceps femoris. He did not ask you to know semitendinosus, but to the left and right, deep of that, is semimembranosus. The butt is gluteus maximus and gluteus medius. Medius fibers run inferiorly, maximus runs obliquely. The calf is gastrocnemius, and deep to that we have soleus, tibialis anterior, extensor digitorum longus. Going obliquely, we have sartorius, inside is gracilis, and the 4 muscles of the quads, rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, and vastus intermedius. If he asks you the back, he can ask trapezius, latissimus dorsi, and deltoids, glutes max, gluteus medius. That's it. That's all the muscles he can ask you. Okay? Yes? SCM. Okay? And then everything else spell out. Okay? Sternocleidomastoideus, because it's a long word.
I know how to spell
You know,
that.
traps, call it trapezius. But everything else is good. Everyone calls the lats. They don't call it latissimus dorsi, but that's what it is. Muscle physiology, again, he's only asked you 4 questions on it. So if you really want to make sure you get that A, know your latency period, contraction phase, relaxation phase of your twitch. Know there's a minimum and a maximum threshold of about 0.75 volts and 8.5 volts. Okay. We also had a wave or temporal summation, which means we're going to stimulate a contraction stronger than an original twitch by increasing the frequency. Versus spatial, we'll have a lower frequency, but we're over a larger area. We have a larger space involved.
Time and space.
Time and space. Temporal versus spatial. Okay, that's only 4 questions. It's normally wave versus spatial, or temporal versus spatial, and then again the parts of the twitch. So from there we talked about the brain. If you can do the brain and know all the outside of the brain, and when I say the outside, what can we see on the bottom of the brain?
Cerebellum.
We can see the cerebellum.
The brainstem.
We can see the brainstem, the pons, the medulla oblongata. We can see the pituitary gland, optic chiasm, and the olfactory inbulbs. That's from the underside. From the top view, we can see the different hemispheres, the right and left hemispheres, separated by the longitudinal fissure. We can see the lobes, frontal, occipital, temporal, and parietal. But for the most part, he's going to ask you this view here, either on a real brain, or on a model, or on a picture. Corpus callosum, fornix, lateral ventricle, hypothalamus, thalamus, pituitary gland, midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, cerebral aqueduct, the fourth ventricle in front of the cerebellum, the arbor vitae inside the cerebellum, the back or the posterior midbrain called the superior and inferior colliculi of the corpora quadrigemina, the gland in front of that or top of that called the pineal gland, the third ventricle inside your thalamus, pituitary, optic chiasm. The gyri are the bumps, the sulci are the dips, the deep dips are your fissures. That's it. That's 20 questions. So we have 20 and 20, that's 40. That's over half, just knowing those 40 things. The dura mater covers the outside. The middle layer is the arachnoid layer. The inside is the pia mater. That makes up your meninges. Your fluid is your cerebral spinal fluid. That takes us to nerves. We have our multipolar neuron having dendrites going towards the cell body where there's a nucleus, an axon hillock leading away from an axon. It's insulated by myelin, and if we're in the CNS, we are oligodendrocytes, and if we're in the PNS, we're Schwann cells. The gaps between the myelin are called the nodes of Ranvier. It's going to end at the terminal axons, and where the nerve hits the muscle, we call that the neuromuscular junction. That's where we are here, where the nerve hits the muscle. The nerve's going to release acetylcholine, your neurotransmitter, which is going to cause sodium ions to rush in, and that causes the outside to be more negative, and that flow of electricity, the negative impulses go deep inside via your T-tubules, causing calcium ions to be released, causing the actin to move on myosin by causing the calcium to bind with the tropomyosin binding sites with troponin to move them out of the way so that actin can move on myosin and the sarcomere can shorten and the muscle contracts. We pump the calcium away with a calcium pump back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum and the muscle relaxes. Again, that's muscle physiology. He may be asking you again, a group of muscle fibers are a myofibril, and a group of them is called a fascicle, surrounded by perimysium. The individual myofibrils are surrounded by endomysium, and the outside of the muscle itself is surrounded by epimysium. If we're nerves, we're the exact same thing with the word neurium. There's a slide over here that is very, very clear, and you see a bunch of circles and lines inside the circles. This is a mid-sagittal slice of a neuron. So we can see a fascicle of the nerve surrounded by what? Perineurium, with your endoneurium surrounding the axons, which is surrounded by myelin. Okay. The spinal cord. You're going to have a spinal cord on there. Know the difference between gray matter and white matter. Gray matter, the white matter has tracks, because a track is a group of axons in the CNS, and a group of axons in the PNS is called a nerve. A group of cell bodies in the PNS is called what? It's called a ganglion. This would be the dorsal root ganglion. And a group of cell bodies inside your CNS is called a nuclei. So your cell bodies of your motor voluntary efferent neurons are going to be found inside this anterior or ventral horn. Sensation comes in, it goes posterior, cell bodies in the DRG, it goes to the dorsal horn, it has an interneuron or an integrating center in between, it goes out the anterior horn, going through the anterior root, which is motor, and your cell bodies are voluntary or in the anterior horn, and the cell bodies of your motor, sympathetic, involuntary, or in the lateral horn. You do not know, you need to know the name of the tracks, and that's your spinal cord. With the spinal cord, he may be asking you, tapering down, the spinal cord is going to end at the conus medullaris. The individual nerves of the lumbar spine is going to continue down as the cauda equina, and it's going to stop at the filum terminale. He's going to ask you plexes. The cervical plexus from C3, 4, and 5 gives rise to the phrenic nerve that controls the diaphragm. We have the brachial plexus, sometimes C4, mainly C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1, giving rise to the brachial plexus, which gives rise to the radial nerve, ulnar nerve, median nerve, to name a few. We also talked about the lumbar plexus. L1 to L4 gives rise to the femoral nerve, and L4 to S4 gives rise to the sacral plexus or the sciatic nerve. He normally asks you two plexes. Name this plexus, he'll show you a picture, you say brachial. Name the cord level, cervical plexus, C3 to C5. So you know the cord level, or know the name of what it's called, or know the name of the major nerves associated with it. Okay. So that's nerve, that's spinal cord. We've already done brain. This right here represents the ventricular system. My hand would be the corpus callosum, the roof of the lateral ventricles. This would be your lateral ventricles, right and left. Third ventricle, cerebral aqueduct. Fourth ventricle, right here. And this at the very bottom would be your central canal going through your spinal cord, containing CSF inside the brain and spinal cord. You will also have CSF outside the brain in the meninges, in your subdural and subarachnoid spaces. That takes us to reflexes and special senses. We just did that. So again, there's 6 questions on reflexes. Know what 2-point discrimination is versus adaptation to sensation, tactile localization. But mainly he asked you the 5 components of a reflex are patella reflex, crossing sensor. The biggest one is pupillary. When the right light shines in the right eye, both eyes constrict, get smaller. Why? Because vision crosses at the optic chiasm. And what type of vision crosses at the optic chiasm? Temporal. Because things go from lateral to medial to the other side and goes down the opposite optic tract. The optic tract goes to the occipital lobe. The optic nerve comes off the optic chiasm, and the optic chiasm is the crossing of your temporal vision. So again, we're going to see an eyeball cut in half. Know the posterior segment, the anterior segment. What separates them? The lens. Know the difference between the iris and the pupil. The vitreous humor in the back, the watery fluid, the aqueous humor in the front. Where the optic nerve hits the eye on the inside, do we have any vision there? No, it's called your blind spot. And then right next to that, we have our greatest area of visual acuity called the fovea centralis. Rods allow us to see in black and white and dim vision. Cones allow us to see in color. I don't think he's really going to ask you to name the muscles of the eye. Just know that there's 6 intrinsic muscles of the eye. Oculomotor nerve, cranial number 3, controls 4 out of the 6. Number 4 and number 6 do the rest. If your eyes get bigger, that's going to be a sympathetic response. It dilates. If your eyes get smaller, it's parasympathetics. 80% of your parasympathetic nervous system came from what cranial nerve? Vagus, number 10. Cranial number 10. The gag reflex and number 10, cranial number 9, number 10 is the gag reflex. The acoustic nerve, the vestibulocochlear nerve, cranial nerve number 8 is for hearing and balance. Hearing is the cochlear branch, balance is the vestibular branch, semicircular canals and the vestibule makes it the vestibular apparatus, and the cochlea is this part here for hearing. It looks like a snail shell. Inside here we have the spiral organ of Corti. In the middle, surrounded by perilymph on the top and bottom, the endolymph, and we have something called a tectoral plate that vibrates once it reaches the diameter of a certain frequency, that pulls on hairs, that stimulates the nerves, that perceives pitch and sound. This is located in the inner ear. The middle ear has the auditory ossicles and the eustachian tube, malleus, incus, and stapes. The eardrum, the tympanic membrane, separates the middle from the external, and the external is going to be the auricle or the pinna, the bottom's the lobe, the front's the tragus, and the canal is your external acoustic meatus or external auditory meatus. I think that's an A.